it's probably going to be taking about 30 minutes, all right? Step 1, write down your customer's avatar as the hero. Step 2, list your name as the guide or your product or your service. Step 3, write down guide's superpowers, but leave it blank if you don't know what makes you different from everybody else out there, right? Then step 4, you know who's the hero, but what are the monsters that they face, right? What are the problems that they face?
Today I'm talking to Arvindh, who's a marketing coach who specializes in gamification strategies for marketing. He's from Bangalore in India. He studied in the UK, traveled the world. He's a father and a husband and a good friend I was lucky to meet through Twitter.
Hey, Morris, thank you so much for this opportunity, man. It really means a lot. And thank you for that intro as well. I really like it, when you need to, talk about me in this way. Feels good.
Well, Arvindh, you have been working on your marketing framework since 2011, and you're one of the few people who has consistent money coming in from online products. Arvindh, when did you realize that gamification was a big deal in marketing?
All right, great question. I've been a child. As a child, I've had to travel a lot, right? And my dad, even though he was in India, he had the opportunity to travel to China, Hong Kong, Kuwait, Singapore, Malaysia, and I would often need to tag along with him. And as a result, my best friends were books and video games. And this love affair with video games continued even when I started working. 2006, I started my career in an IT company after I finished my engineering. And I started to go meet my friends in 2011, right? It was a 5-year reunion, if you will. At this time, I was, I considered myself successful. I had a beautiful wife, I had a motorcycle, and I had like about 40,000 rupees in the bank. And that's the currency in India, which is approximately $500 or so. But I go meet these other people who had started working at the same time as I did. One of them was building a house. Another one was going off to Venice on vacation. And a third, he had a car. And compared to all of them, I felt like I was like the ultimate loser in life, right? So obviously I decided like, all right, I am going to take control and change my life. I started getting up at 5 a.m., started reading books, I started doing computer courses. And what ended up happening was that this system, it worked beautifully for about a week. After that, the system just started cracking and eventually everything just came crumbling down because I couldn't sustain it. But unfortunately, what happened was I didn't stop where I was before. I just shot through, right? And everything just went like absolutely haywire. As a result of this, I started to escape from the real world and I went to the place where I was still successful of some degree, right? Some place where I didn't feel shame or hunted in any which way. And that was video games, particularly a game called Diablo 3. Now, I love that game. And what I ended up doing most of the time was just running around killing monsters, practically feeling unstoppable. And because of that constant dopamine stream, the way the games are designed, what ended up happening was I completely lost myself in it. It became so bad that I started ignoring personal hygiene, started ignoring work. I started ignoring my wife as well. And that was not a good place to be. So I was like, okay, this is okay. I can continue. But one night, I think it was about 2:30, maybe 3 a.m. And I was, the computer was in the hall. I was sitting there, was playing. And then I stopped to get a snack from the fridge. Now, when I opened the fridge for the first time, right, and this is something you might have seen, right? Every time, like if you eat snacks at night, the first time you open the fridge for a snack, the standard or the bar for an acceptable snack is very, very high. But as the night goes on, that standard drops. So at 2:30 or 3 a.m, there I was sitting on the couch and I was eating dry coconut powder. That's not even a snack. That is an ingredient, right? And I was there just eating and I was looking at the screen and like, the first thought in my head was, what the hell am I doing? And luckily, the second thought in my head was, wait a sec, what if my life was like Diablo 3? Okay. So back in that day, I was playing that game and I was like, what if my life could be like an RPG, a role-playing game? My journey started then. And obviously I didn't have the necessary skills or the knowledge or the experience to make it work. But over time, and you can see, I've read a ton of books on psychology, game design, gamification, behavior, motivation, and finally putting all of these things together, I've arrived at a framework that is heavily influenced by The Hero's Journey by Dr. Joseph Campbell, as well as design elements from video games, such as points, level up, loot, monsters, weapons, and stuff like that. And I put all of that together into what I call the game plan. It is a framework that anybody can use to supercharge their marketing using elements of games in non-game contexts, which is essentially gamification. So yeah, that's how I made this happen.
Wow, Arvin, thank you so much for summarizing your story here, because
Mm-hmm.
that was one of the reasons how you and I connected. Is I heard your
Yes.
story and I was fascinated by it, and I said to myself, I need to talk to Arvind. That's such a massive transformation in your life, and you've used that experience to build a marketing framework to
Mm-hmm.
now help other businesses, solopreneurs with their marketing and
Mm-hmm.
their growth.
Mm-hmm.
You already kind of alluded to it,
Mm-hmm.
but just for to clarify,
Mm-hmm.
let's get clear on the definition. What do you mean by gamification
Mm-hmm.
in marketing, and what does it mean?
So the gamification industry, right? It was like really hot about a decade ago, when we had heavyweights, just ruling the roost and talking about it. And then the industry kind of changed. But throughout this time, there has never been a more commonly accepted definition of gamification. And the one that I work with is using game elements in non-game contexts. So there are different parts of games, right? So you have art, you have story, you have mechanics, you have points, badges, leaderboards. These are all elements of games. But when you take them out of a game and then you put them in a different context that is not a game, that's what I mean by gamification, right? And in particular, when we are looking at gamification marketing, I'm looking at what are the lessons that we can use from the game industry itself, right? Because that is one of the places, like apart from social media, where a ton of research has been done to figure out how do you keep people hooked? How do you grab their attention? How can you not just hack their attention, but how can you point it in the right direction? When you take all of these and a whole bunch of other things as well, and you plug it in together to either give you clarity, to give you control, to help you, get liberated from confusion, that is my definition of actually using gamification in marketing. And that's pretty much what the put the player first framework, the game plan itself, is all about, right? If you think about it, you can think of anything as an adventure, right? Like if you've seen Lord of the Rings, right? So you have our little boy, what's his name, Frodo, trying to throw the ring into Mordor, right? That is an adventure. But in this game, in this thing that he's going to be going through, he's the hero. He's got monsters along the way, and he has an end goal. If I wanted to lose weight, right, and trust me, I do, I would be the hero. And the monsters I have are mobile apps that let me order food at an instant. I have snacks and chips within arm's reach. And I have an office in the second floor where nobody can see me snacking. Right? So these are all different monsters that I have. Now, just by reframing any sort of a situation as this sort of an adventure, that's gamification. Then when you accompany it with a specific mindset where you put the player first, or you design the experience around the player, and you are in it to play the long game, right? It's not just play it once and then leave, but it's a cycle where you play so that you want to keep on playing. That's what it is. That's what gamification marketing is all about.
Thank you so much for giving us that definition, Arvind, because I know that gamification has several definitions, but I really like yours and how you turned it into your game plan. Who would you say are the best people in businesses to use a gamified approach to marketing?
This is a very important question, right? And often within my heart, there are multiple definitions that are at war. But what I think would be the kind of people who would most benefit from this would be people in three separate categories, right? First would be people who are going from 0 to 1, people who are trying to launch their own businesses, right? Because many a times, and especially when I'm talking to technical founders who just love to write code and build stuff, the concept of, let's say, validation or customer development or messaging and communication, that never, is a priority. And just recently, I was trying to build out a checklist, and I was trying to figure out, hey, when should somebody actually be building something? I think it was like step number 25 of like 34 or something. And I was like, okay. So anybody who's trying to, either a serial entrepreneur, an indie hacker, someone who's going to go from 0 to 1 when they want to launch something, they're a good audience. Second one is somebody who's going to go from 1 to N. And what I mean by that, again, I'm borrowing Peter Thiel's definition of 0 to 1 and 1 to N. What I mean there is someone who's trying to like grow their business. I'm not talking about people who are like massive companies and all that. There are expensive consultants that somebody could pay to help you figure out all of this. But when you are that solo founder, especially from a technical background, and you don't have that sort of an understanding or that general feeling of, hey, this is what marketing is, I think those kind of people benefit the most. And of course, there are bonus points if you're a gamer, because then you're like, I get it. You know what I'm talking about, Morris?
Yes, 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 absolutely. So what you're saying is people who start from scratch, who don't have experience or who don't have much
Mm-hmm.
experience in marketing themselves, marketing their own ideas, and they just want to
Yes.
get to that first level of
Mm-hmm.
proving their
Yes.
offer, starting to make some
Yes.
money. Those are people who benefit from your gamified framework, as
Right.
well as those who want to start scaling, right? That's what I heard you say. Like these are the two groups who can really take it and run with it. One thing that you mentioned to me are the key psychological principles behind gamification.
Mm-hmm.
What are these key psychological principles
Mm-hmm.
and why do they work so well?
Right. So, like I said before, the gaming industry is an industry that has invested a lot of research into figuring out, hey, how can we design the most interesting and addictive experience ever, right? And there's been a ton of research done in that space. And deriving from there, there's a fantastic gentleman by the name of Yu Kai Chow, who's written a book called Actionable Gamification, in which he goes down into like 8 and perhaps 9 core drives that anybody can use to motivate others to do stuff, right? There has been more research done by Dan Pink in his book Drive. Robert Cialdini talks about in his books Persuasion as well as Influence. And there's been a lot of research that has been done in all of these books, but particularly from a gaming principle, right? There are a couple of things that we can very easily borrow and then apply in just any sort of a situation, particularly in marketing and business. And number one is motivation itself, right? Why do we want our customers to take action? That is the number one question in marketing, right? How can I get them to do what I want them to do? So you could tap into a sense of epic meaning, right? Like, for example, I believe nowadays Patagonia is been running ads on Reddit. At least I'm getting those ads where they're talking about saving some lake or water body, right? So they're trying to tap into a sense of epic meaning. And then if you look at Reddit again, there's this thing called Our Place. It's where people could get to come in and drop pixels as a part of the marketing thing, but it really, really boosts the whole activity on Reddit. Why does that work? It's because it allows them to be more creative. So motivations are fantastic ways to look at this. But what I personally really enjoy is the concept of reframe and bleed. And I briefly hinted on this before, but in my framework, I have this situation where in the beginning of a story or a game, you have a hero who is facing a bunch of different monsters, right? And these monsters, they make the hero's world miserable. What the hero wants is to get to paradise, a place where these monsters are not there. And one day, after stuff just hits the fan, they set out on an adventure, right? And along the way, they meet a guide who has some sort of superpowers. What this guide does is the guide gives the hero a bunch of different weapons, one for each sort of a monster that the hero has to fight, and then tells them, okay, do this, do this, do this, sends them on a bunch of different quests. The hero goes on these quests, fights off monster one, monster two, monster three, goes through that list, and by going on these different quests, the hero levels up and gets a ton of loot as well. Now, this is pretty much the arc of most adventures in Dungeons and Dragons or other role playing games. It's heavily based on the hero's journey, but with additional video game elements in this. Now, that being said, you can map this, you can reframe your business itself as such a thing. Except, number one, you are not the hero, the customer is the hero. And the customer has a bunch of monsters or problems. And these problems, they really mess up the customer's world, or they cause a lot of pain, frustration, unmet needs, and unmet desires. And if you invert this broken world, this world where they're absolutely unhappy, you get paradise, the world that the customer actually wants. And your job as the guide is to take the hero from that broken world to paradise. And how do you do that? Well, number one, you use your USP or your UVP, right? Your only factor. What is something that only you have? right? So for example, Morris, right, you have these fantastic case studies of helping people, I believe it was to grow their YouTube subscription by 500 plus subscribers. I was like, dude, that's insane. I don't know anybody else who does that. Now imagine, right? You have that as a unique only thing that only you have, and you can use that to help somebody else. You can give them specific things. You could give them access to your community. You could give them access to courses. You could create a whole bunch of different weapons to solve your customers' problems, right? These weapons could be products, coaching, offerings, systems, whatever it is. And when your customers, they start going through a to-do list, a jobs to be done, a set of jobs that they need to do, what happens is that they get external rewards, that is loot. They also undergo an internal transformation, and that is the level up. And as this happens, as they go through the entire thing, they have now automatically gone from that broken world, a place where they were miserable, to paradise, where they are super happy, right? And this sort of a thinking, it is ridiculously addictive, because the same thing, like what I just used to describe Create, Grow, Profit, Morris, can be applied to losing weight, can be applied to teaching my daughter to read more books. It is like you can apply it anywhere. And I think that is perhaps that the power of reframe is perhaps the most powerful psychological principle that we can apply. There are others, but I think for now, they should suffice.
For people who are listening to you and taking notes, could you give us a short, like very simplified step-by-step game plan or checklist of something that we could implement over the weekend, for example?
Sure. It won't even take you the weekend. It's probably going to be taking about 30 minutes. All right. Open up a notepad or Obsidian or whatever you use. Step 1, write down your customer's avatar as the hero. Step 2, list your name as the guide or your product or your service. Step 3, write down guide superpowers, but leave it blank if you don't know what makes you different from everybody else out there, right? Then step 4, you know who's the hero, but what are the monsters that they face, right? What are the problems that they face? List them down. Then the next step is to list out the broken world. What is the pain that each of these monsters are going to be causing your hero? Write that down. And once you have the broken world, invert it to get paradise, right? So if they're really, really bad in one place, you invert it to get them to a really, really good place. Write that down. Once you have that paradise, break that down into loot and level up. Loot is the stuff that they get as external rewards. Level up are the internal changes that they're going to be getting. Okay. So now we've got the hero, the guide superpower. We have monsters. We have the broken world. We have paradise. We have loot, and we have level up. Now, go back to your list of monsters, and then in the weapons section, write down what is one thing that you could create to help them solve each of their problems. Boom, boom, boom. This is going to be your list of weapons. All right. Once you have that, you're almost done. The penultimate thing that you want to do is to list out what are the exact things that your hero will need to do step by step to go from the broken world to paradise, right? Look, so step 1, do this. Step 2, do this. Write that down. Those become your quests. And finally, once you have all of this written down, what you got to do is, start talking about it. And it becomes really, really simple. For each of your answers, ask who, what, when, where, why, and how. When you multiply them, you get a bunch of prompts, answer those questions, and you are sorted. That's how I would do it.
Arvindh, thank you so much for sharing your framework here with us. Which links do you want me to put in the description below this video, and where can people go to find out more about you?
Cool. Thank you for that, Morris. As a companion to the framework, I have created a free video course that talks about how this framework came to be and how anybody can apply it. It is available on arvindsundar.com/free course. I'll make sure I get the link to you as well. And beyond that, the best way to connect with me would be on Twitter at Arvindh Sundar.
All right, perfect. So make sure you grab Arvind's free course if you want to implement everything you've learned here from him, and also make sure you follow him on Twitter. I will put both of those links in the description below this video. Arvindh, thank you so much for your time. Thank you for being here, and I'm looking forward to seeing more of you on social media.